Vibrations of the Ancients, Science, Stone, and Echoes of Forgotten Worlds. Part 1. Everything is vibration. Let's begin, not with a bang, but with a hum. You see, there's a rather cheeky little idea floating around the fringes of both physics and metaphysics. A theory so audacious that it might make Einstein raise an eyebrow, and the ancient priests of Peru nod in solemn agreement. The idea that all matter is, at its core, light. Or, put another way, everything you see, touch, eat, throw at your sibling, or stub your toe on is vibration. Yeah, vibration. Not in the New Age crystal shop sense, though, as we'll see, they might have had a point, but in the quantum field theory sense, in the string theory sense, in the, hold on a minute, is this science or sorcery sense? So settle in, pour yourself a coffee, and let's begin our journey from the vibrating void of quantum fields to the stone blocks of ancient temples to explore what just might be the rediscovery of a knowledge we once had, lost. And now we're fumbling back toward with very expensive particle accelerators. Let's get one thing straight. Matter isn't really stuff in the solid sense we were all taught at school. It's more like patterns in a sea of potential, energy with good posture, light that's been slowed down, so to speak, caught in a kind of existential traffic jam. Take Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. This tells us that mass is just a condensed form of energy. And what is light, if not energy, at its most radiant? But quantum physics takes things a step further, and things get weird fast. According to quantum field theory, every fundamental particle, electron, quark, photon, is simply a vibration in an underlying quantum field. Change the vibration, change the particle. It's like swapping instruments in an orchestra. The same sheet music, different sound. One field becomes an electron, another a photon, depending on how it wiggles. And string theory, that takes it even further. In this still unproven but mathematically elegant idea, everything, matter, energy, force, is made of tiny vibrating strings of energy. Different vibrations make different particles. It's not unlike tuning a guitar. Change the frequency of the string and you change the note. So, if everything is vibration, what happens if you hit the right one? Now comes a juicy bit. If matter is slowed down light, vibration at a lower frequency, could we not, in theory, retune it, disrupt its harmony, push it out of phase? So let's go full science fiction for a moment. If you could match the resonant frequency of a material, you could, like an opera singer shattering a wine glass, cause it to lose coherence, not with brute force, but with finesse. But it's not just a fantasy. This principle underlies real technologies. Ultrasound shatters kidney stones. Lasers, which are concentrated light, cut through steel. Acoustic levitation can suspend very small objects in mid-air. So imagine this, a handheld device tuned precisely to the frequency of granite. You point it at a boulder or in a quarry, it gives a zap and the stone suddenly, resonating in perfect discord with itself, begins to crumble or even lift with no need for chisels, levers or sweat. Ridiculous? Possibly. But the physics says it's not impossible, just incredibly difficult with our current technology. All of this points to one seductive conclusion. The universe is not made of things, but of vibrations. Fields singing to one another across space-time. Matter is what happens when energy plays a certain tune. Change the tune, change the reality. And if it's true that our world is not a machine of cogs and wheels, but a symphony of resonance, everything from atoms to galaxies held in form, not by bricks, but by frequency. Which begs the question, if reality is made of music, who were the first composers? It's here, standing at the edge of physics, that we must turn eyes wide back to the past, because once upon a time, long before hadron colliders and Planck lengths, there were civilizations that moved mountains. Literally. They lifted stones that weigh as much as 500 cars. They carved them with surgical precision. They stacked them into pyramids, temples and citadels that have lasted for millennia, often without a drop of mortar. And if we ask how they did it, the answers we're left with tend to fall into two camps. The official story, which is often a bit vague and heavy on logs and ramps, and the whispered one, which speaks of lost knowledge, of sound, of frequency, of resonance. So if the world is made of vibration, could the ancients have known the tune? Part 2. Stone that sings. If part 1 was a gentle ripple in the quantum pool, part 2 is a deep dive into ancient waters, the kind that shimmer with forgotten knowledge, improbable feats, and the distant echo of resonant frequencies. Because if matter is vibration, and vibration can be manipulated, then perhaps, just perhaps, our ancestors weren't dragging stones up ramps after all. Maybe they were tuning them. Let's take a stroll, or rather a pilgrimage, through some of the world's most enigmatic megalithic sites. Bring sturdy boots and an open mind. Things are about to get very curious. Let's start with the facts. Around the world, colossal stone structures dot the landscape, and not just in one place or time. In Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman features stones so large, some over 100 tons, so perfectly fitted that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar, no filler, just impossible precision. In Lebanon, at the site of Baalbek, lies the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing in at a breezy 1,000 tons, and 3 even larger blocks were discovered nearby. We're not talking about heavy lifting anymore. We're in the realms of what, the actual physics? In Egypt, the Great Pyramid contains granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons, transported from quarries hundreds of miles away. In Bolivia, Pumapunku has stones with machine-like cuts and interlocking grooves, yet no machines we know of could have managed it, not at the time. And yet, these sites exist. Their stones haven't budged in thousands of years. Their corners haven't crumbled. Their mystery remains intact. So how were they made? And how were the stones moved? Well, the conventional story involves an enthusiastic gang of workers, some wooden rollers, a lot of rope, and sheer brute force, which sounds fine until you actually try it. Logs can't support thousands of tons without splintering into firewood. Manpower is powerful, yes, but not enough to move rocks the size of double-decker buses uphill. And bronze chisels don't exactly explain the laser straight cuts and right angles you find in hard granite. Even engineers and stonemasons have scratched their heads when visiting these sites, often muttering things like, "We couldn't do this today, not easily." So unless we're willing to chalk it up to aliens, and we're not, we need another explanation. Let's return to vibration, sound, frequency, because ancient myths and obscure reports keep pointing not to brute force but to resonance. In 1939, Swedish engineer Henry Kjellson wrote of monks in Tibet who used sound to lift massive stones into the air. Drums, trumpets and chants were arranged in a semicircle aimed at a large stone slab. After a specific sequence of sounds and much chanting, the stone rose and floated to a cliff 250 meters above. Now, this account is second-hand and often dismissed, but it's intriguing and not entirely implausible. Modern experiments in semantics show that sound frequencies can organize matter into geomagnetic patterns. Sand on a metal plate dances into mandalas, water forms, standing waves, fluids spiral into fractals. Imagine scaling this up and tuning it to granite. Could ancient structures have discovered or in ancient cultures, have discovered or inherited this knowledge? Many ancient sites aren't just visually precise, they're acoustically engineered. The King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid resonates at 440 Hz. The stone circles like Stonehenge produce standing waves when sound is introduced. Temples in Malta, South America and India contain rooms with extraordinary acoustic properties, amplifying chants, humming at specific frequencies. These weren't accidents. These were harmonic temples, built with sonic intention. Now, let's push the envelope. If the ancients had tools based on vibration, tools that could cut, lift, or resonate with stone, they wouldn't leave us blueprints. They'd leave behind results, the kind we still marvel at. Imagine tuning forks that could fracture rock like glass, handheld resonance devices that made stone temporarily light or pliable, chambers that use sound to neutralize weight or create anti-gravity effects. Sounds far-fetched? So does the idea of Wi-Fi to a medieval peasant. Modern physics is catching whiffs of this ancient scent. Acoustic levitation is now a laboratory reality, albeit with tiny objects. Piezoelectricity, the way crystals like quartz respond to pressure by producing voltage, is well documented. Resonant frequency disruption is used in medicine, materials science, and even security tech. We're just beginning to explore how frequency and matter interact, but what if the ancients mastered it? What if our temples were their laboratories? What if modern science is, without realizing it, retracing those long-lost steps? In which case, the frontier of quantum physics may not lie ahead, but behind us. So where does this leave us? With strange questions, curious evidence, and the echo of forgotten technologies that might be based on principles we're only just beginning to understand again. We've walked among ruins, heard whispers in the stone, seen the impossible precision. Now we turn forward to modern physics, where vibration is not just metaphor, but mathematical law, where reality is made not of stuff, but of strings and waves and fields. Which brings us to part 3. What happens when ancient magic and modern science finally shake hands? Can quantum physics and string theory illuminate what our ancestors already knew? And where might this rediscovery lead us next? Part 3. When magic becomes physics. We've wandered through the quantum realm, where particles are vibrations. We've stood in the shadow of ancient stones, marveling at feats no modern crane dare attempt. And we've heard a hum, faint, persistent, a tune threading its way through science and myth alike. Now, in this final part, we ask the question that might rattle your reality a little. What if magic and physics aren't opposites, but estranged siblings? Grab your cup of coffee or something stronger, and let's tie it all together. Ancient knowledge, string theory, and the extraordinary notion that the universe may be one big, beautiful song. String theory, excuse me, it sounds elegant, almost musical, and that's not an accident. At its core, string theory proposes that the fundamental particles we observe aren't point-like dots, but rather tiny vibrating strings. The reason an electron behaves differently from a quark is because it's vibrating in a different way. This is true, or if this is true, then everything, matter, force, gravity, space-time, is vibration. The universe, as physicist Michio Kaku puts it, is a symphony of vibrating strings. Well, let's be honest, this sounds suspiciously like something a druid would say, or an Egyptian priest, or a Vedic rishi. Here's where things get eerie. Many ancient traditions speak of sound vibration as the basis of reality. In Hindu cosmology, the universe begins with the sound Om, the primordial vibration. The Bible begins with, in the beginning was the Word. Pythagoras believed the cosmos operated on a mathematical harmony because of the spheres. And in Kabbalistic mysticism, creation arises from vibration encoded in sacred language. Now, compare that to the modern physicist's claim reality is shaped by the resonance of quantum fields. It starts to look less like superstition and more like poetic science. What we used to call spells might have been called algorithms. What we call frequency healing might have been rudimentary vibrational medicine. The lost technologies of Atlantis or Lemuria, for those who entertain such legends, could have been based not on nuts and bolts, but on resonance and waveforms. So what happened? Why did we forget? There's a recurring theme in ancient lore. Cataclysm, floods, quakes, skyfire, civilizations destroyed and knowledge lost. Whether you interpret these as literal events or allegorical warnings, the result is the same. Humanity had to start over. We've kept the myths, we lost the tools. Some structures survived, the operating manuals not so much. And so we became children in the ruins, marveling at temples, reciting chants, but no longer understanding how or why it all worked. Until now. Because science is creeping back to the wisdom that vibration underpins everything. And not just inert matter, but consciousness itself. Here's a thought to pickle your brain. What if your mind is also a frequency? Quantum biology is already probing this possibility. Brainwaves, alpha, beta, and theta are literally measured in hertz. Meditation alters frequency. Emotions have measurable vibrations. Some scientists go further, proposing that consciousness arises not from the brain, but from an interaction with a universal field, something akin to cosmic Wi-Fi, with your brain as the receiver. It ties in uncomfortably well with ancient mysticism, which often describes the self as a node in a greater energetic web, a soul connected to the all. So if you can tune a stone, could you tune a person, a society, a civilization? And what happens when we remember how? Now we stand on the threshold. Our particle physicists are talking about holographic universes. Engineers are designing sound-based levitation devices. Neuroscientists are decoding consciousness like software. And in parallel, people are turning back to ancient techniques, chanting, singing bowls, binaural beats, not as superstition, but as biohacking. We may be on the brink of a new scientific revolution, or rather, a reintegration of knowledge we once possessed. Imagine a future where surgery is done with precisely tuned sound instead of scalpels. Skyscrapers are printed with vibrational field generators. Mental illness is treated by harmonic realignment. Education is not delivered just through data, but through frequency entrainment. Imagine a future that looks strangely like the past. So let's revisit our wild hypothesis. All matter is vibration. Vibration can be tuned. The ancients may have known how, and we're on the verge of remembering. This isn't science fiction. This is science circling back to a deeper truth, one our ancestors may have whispered into the stones. The temples still stand, the frequencies still hum, and maybe, just maybe, we are the generation that will hear the tune again. Reality is music, and we are the instruments. The question is, will we learn to play in harmony?